All right, I'd like to call a committee of the whole meeting for Monday, June 5th, 2023 to order. Call, please.
Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Christensen.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowering.
Here.
Trustee Nedved.
Here.
Trustee Salazar. Here.
All right, thank you. Audience comments? Trustee comments? Item 1, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 1 is outdoor special event permits. So we have a few sections of our code that they get tweaked every so often, mostly because they fall out of whack with what we see in operations in the real world outside of the office. Right now, one of those things that we're going to look at are our special event permit requirements. Upcoming is also video gaming, which we just talked about a year ago, but haven't gone through some recent things with our codes. Probably good to bring it back to the board again. And then the other one is mobile food trucks. And we had some ideas on how to change that and bring it back. But what we like to do is create these as more of a workshop. So instead of bringing them to you as ideas, I mean, we have some thoughts, but instead of giving ideas and having the board go back and forth, we thought we more or less just pose questions and see where you want to go with it. And then we'll come back with some revisions to the code and then let you look at the revisions, and we'll go another step beyond that. So the first one tonight is outdoor special events. We did this one first because mobile food trucks are somewhat tied into this, and that's where it gets convoluted. So we thought, honestly, to put them together, I think would have been overwhelming for everyone. I mean, Mike and I sat in an office for an hour back and forth, and we were getting ourselves confused. So we thought by separating them, it's kind of compartmentalizing everything. The first one is really just about trying to address certain things that we see from the office standpoint of making special events requests difficult. So mainly it's a time requirement that it causes a lot of problems. And the other one is parking. With the time requirement, there are times that the staff has to make discretionary decisions or whatnot for something to come in last minute because it didn't make it to a board meeting. And you're like, okay, does that really need to make it to a board meeting? It's really borderline. It's the staff doesn't see any issue with, it's going to take up 2 extra parking spots. Is that really something to tell them they can't have their event this weekend? We have provisions in the code that cover certain things already to protect us in other areas. So what I want to do is go through a few things. One being the parking requirement that triggers having a special event permit. Food trucks, we'll talk about that. There's a whole section of the code that addresses food trucks already. And then the idea of having an administrative permit process and a village board process, depending on the type of request that comes in. Some towns have that. So if you do get a last minute request, it's something that's not going to be, something that would really drive your neighbors nuts or really bother neighboring businesses. It could be something mundane like, hey, we're having a food truck, but we're having 2 food trucks instead of 1. That literally would require a special event permit to have a second food truck at like somebody's, get together at their special event. So the staff can look at that and maybe say, oh, it's just a second food truck. It's not 30 food trucks. It's not the end of the world. We can sign your permit and be done. So with that, I'm going to kind of walk you through. This is what requires a special event permit in our village code. So basically, this is one that I will kind of read verbatim a little bit. So the use of our property, the blocking of our streets, the use, and that blocking of the streets also comes with, it's not written there, but basically it's the use of our personnel too. So if you needed our police officers to cross people or public works to actually be on site for whatever duties, which honestly in my time here, that is extremely rare. I don't know if we've ever had a private event ask for our staff, but just in case that's there. The use of commercial parking that reduces the number of required parking spaces. I'll get into that one more. We talked a little bit about food trucks. We're going to talk about that a little more. The sale of alcoholic liquor. I think that one was put in originally because it was a way to ensure that somebody who was having a public event was going to at least, go through a process. But the truth is all special events and what we call special use liquor licenses, which are the difference is a special event liquor license is for civic groups, charitable organizations, government entities. If they want to do an event on a weekend, they have to get a special event liquor license. And the mayor can sign off on those internally already by code. A special use liquor license is for, let's say, I'll just use a business, Pet Supplies Plus. Normally wouldn't have liquor, but if they wanted to do an outdoor event, and they wanted someone to sell liquor, they can get what's called a special use liquor license. And all that does is they just have to use somebody to sell the liquor who has a valid Illinois state retail liquor license already. So it's someone who's already certified, insured and everything. That also by code can just be signed off by the mayor. But for some reason, we require it to go to the board first, when if they miss the board meeting, they can't have their event. Any event which sound amplification equipment is used after the times that are listed here, 9 on the weekdays, 10 on the weekends. We actually put that in, I think, right when I started here. And it was to protect people from having just backyard parties, things like that, where maybe they're having a live band till midnight. Yes, we have a noise ordinance, and the noise ordinance says it can't be excessive, but by permit, you could at least be a little more tolerant. So like if someone came in, and we've had them come in for a wedding, they want them in their backyard, they want to go to 11, the board then gets a chance to say, whoa, you got like 30 neighbors right behind you. Maybe 11's too late, maybe 10, and then turn it down and then abide by our noise ordinance after 10, or 11's reasonable on a Saturday night, one time every 5 years. And then you could allow that.
Would you define electrical equipment? What about a radio?
So that's where the discretion comes in. People ask us that all the time. It says amplified equipment in our code. If you have a radio outside, that's not to us needing a permit. It would be if you had a DJ who actually has like speakers or amplification equipment, or a live band. And the police department, they get put in a bad situation sometimes, because if the party goes on, let's say the permit is good till 11 and the music's still, somewhat loud, the police always have the ability to go there on a call and say that's excessive, turn the music down, otherwise you're getting a ticket. So a lot of times it doesn't happen that way when people get a special event permit, because it's almost like everyone in the neighborhood knows you're having a party. It's graduation time. It's wedding time. It happens so infrequently. I know we've all heard it probably in our neighborhoods, but it's not often. The requirement for parking is very, very specific. So it doesn't give a lot of leeway. So what it basically says, if you see it here, it says the use of any commercial parking lot and or blocking of any commercial parking area that reduces the numbers required. So to put that in perspective, we require, unless it's different by PUD or annexation agreement, we require 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of retail. Okay. So an average storefront, let's say, is about 1,500 square feet. They sometimes range up to about 2,000. If that's a storefront, that storefront by code should have about 6 to 8 parking spaces dedicated to that one spot. So let's say you have a 1,500 square foot building or storefront, and you have 6 spots that you need, and you want to use one of those for a pop-up tent, but your event's really like inside, you're just doing maybe a pop-up tent for a couple tables outside. Because you reduced your parking from 6 spots to 5 spots, you are now one below what the code requires. You'd have to come to the board to get permission to do that. We had an incident with that. This comes up quite a bit, actually. Parking comes up a lot. Woodman's was a good one. They wanted to do an outdoor event once, and we went back and forth whether they needed board approval, because they were going to take like 50 spots up for a giant tent, but they have like 350 spots or something like that. And we've all been to Woodman's. Half the parking lot is empty. So by code, it says bring it to the board, but we all know that the practice is it never fills up in the back area of those lots. So to tell them they can't have an event, or they have to wait or postpone it after they've advertised it for something like that, what the staff was thinking is we can keep a parking requirement, but instead of making it so stringent, basically put a provision in that it lets us say something along the lines of if after review, internal review, it's deemed to create an adverse effect on parking or whatnot, then it can go to the board or require a permit, I should say. And another good example is you go back to that storefront that needs 6 spots and they reduce to 5. Chances are that storefront is part of a building that has 5 other units, and they may not need all their parking. So they might be in a lot that has 50 spots, but they're reducing just their 1 spot's requirement by 1. There's still 45 other spots in the lot, but you're saying, no, you need a permit because you reduced it by 1. So that's where it gets a little tight. It leaves a lot of angst if something comes in last second and we're scrambling to come up with a way to, good examples, Rustic Fox came in for their farmer's market. when we approved it, we didn't know the total number of vendors they were going to have. It was much more than we thought it was. They ended up using their entire parking lot. So we're like, okay, you can't use your entire parking lot. But then Mike and I are sitting there and figuring out, okay, well, in the code, what's the catch? Is there something here? And then, of course, they're part of town center, which is part of a gigantic sea of parking. So by PUD, you're like, okay, well, technically there's still enough parking because the PUD has 500 spaces. So it just requires us to do a lot of digging to see if we can make something work without on a last second.
No, it
notice.
makes sense, yeah.
The mobile food vendor provisions go back a few years. They were part of, there was some discussion when mobile food trucks, as you know, are becoming more popular. We just had an event with mobile food trucks that had a lot of people. And we have not had an issue with them per se in town. They have not caused any, we've not gotten any, hey, they're blocking streets. They're here on this, they're setting up because they're not allowed to set up on a property. So let's say a gas station, they want to sell, I don't know, tacos or hot dogs or whatever, and they set up a food truck. They technically can't do that for more than 2 hours, one at every week. If they do it more than 2 hours, they need a special event permit. So if they want to be there on a Saturday, but they want to be there every Saturday for 3 hours, they would come back and get a special event permit or something like that. What we're looking to do is essentially get them out of the special event requirement at all, any permit, because there's an entire section of the code that talks about mobile food vendors already. It includes all these provisions already. The truth is they're not coming in to get permits anyways. So when I checked with our police department, every single food truck is supposed to get a permit. I think we issued 2 last year. And we know that they're not coming. And on a weekend, if somebody's having a party at a business or they're catering to their, their employees, it's exempted already by code for the residents to have a party, a private party. So let's say somebody wants to have a pizza truck in a cul-de-sac for like 4 houses, and they all chip in and have one coming on a Saturday. That's fine. It's exempted. It's a private event. We don't require a special event permit. Now, if they require, it gets gray. If they ask for 2 trucks, it may actually require a permit then at that point. It's not like on Saturdays we're driving around. I mean, like the police are available, but haven't been really in the business of going there and be like, hey, you have 2 food trucks, you have to shut down your birthday party, when they're already licensed by King County to operate a food truck. Where the provisions the board set for mobile food vendors was, and this, it's been a few years ago, was primarily to prevent them from staying on somebody's property at a commercial property and setting up shop there, becoming a brick and mortar business. We even had a provision that we talked about incubators on 31. And Mike and I, we had that because we had a business that was looking to use their food truck, which is no longer looking to use their food truck. And so Mike and I are talking about taking that whole section out of the code again, just getting down to the basics, regulating mobile food vendors just in a section, and seeing what the board really wants to do with mobile food trucks, how much you want to enforce, how much you actually want to allow. So with that, we're looking to just get them out of special event permits.
No, I think that's a good idea.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Because we don't want to like break up somebody's birthday party and they're at
Yeah,
home and just.
It's already addressed in another place, so
Yeah.
why do
I
they need to
mean-
be here as well?
So the end of this was, we talked about breaking out. Now, this is just, some ideas that we're throwing on some paper, but we talked about where the comfort level would be. I of course don't want to do anything that the board doesn't want me to do. And so I want to make sure that you're comfortable that anything that was done internally is something that, Steve or his staff can sign off on this. But to me, when we were looking at it, Mike and I were trying to break out where we thought the board's comfort would be. And to me, anytime someone wants to use one of our roads and actually shut a road down, I wouldn't feel comfortable shutting a road down with the board's approval, because I've been there. I know what it does to residents who are unaware that a road got shut down and can't get out to a baseball game on a Saturday morning. And I've fielded those complaints before. So to me, having our staff or closing a road down or having us have that physically be there as a presence to cross people, things like that, probably needs board, because that's our resources and that's our road. The times, because I know the sensitivity of what it can be to allow someone, I would never sign off on someone's wedding to midnight in a backyard without knowing the board was okay with that, because I know that can generate a lot of concerns. from residents. So I felt like maybe that one felt better for, if you're having a backyard event and it's going to be a big event, typically you would hope that there's two ways that it actually happens. Most people don't get the permit. But what ends up happening is the police go out there, we wait till 10 o'clock or whatever, they get the call. And I would say, wait, if there's a call, they'll go before that. But typically, if it's after 10, they'll just tell them to turn it down and do the best to address it already anyways. But I definitely wouldn't want to sign off on something till midnight and knowingly just give somebody permission without the board's knowledge. And then the alcohol, we put a footnote at the bottom. I think the original intent, because we did the special event code back in 2014, I think our original intent was that liquor is serious. You know, it needs to be looked at because, you know, that's something that's really, you know, oh, this could be an issue. But then starting to look at that differently, if you're a retail business using a special use license, you have to use someone who's already licensed by the state of Illinois somewhere else. It could be a North Aurora business. Like you could physically be Pet Supplies Plus and use the turf room or somebody else to sell liquor at your event. So it could be a North Aurora business. It could be a Batavia business that has a liquor license, but they're already licensed and background checked and everything to the state. So I think that wasn't the intent. My guess was the intent was if you're a true special event liquor, not a special use, a special event liquor license, you're an organization that typically doesn't have a liquor license. So you're volunteer based. But once again, we have provisions in the code that says, as long as you're Bassett trained or whatever, affiliated trained as Bassett, or you have certain people on duty that are in compliance, you have insurance, and that all gets submitted, the mayor has the ability to just sign off on that anyways. So that's why we figured it was just easy if someone comes to us at the last minute, wants to have an event. Like the food truck was a good one. They wanted to originally serve liquor. We talked to them. We said, okay, maybe next year, let's see how it goes. They kind of dropped it on us right before the event. And with that one, they were going to use a company or some kind of group that has the necessary license or whatever to come to us and apply for it, is my understanding. So then we would have just been able to say, no, this is acceptable. You have the proper stuff and just sign off on it. On the administrator side, it says the use of any village property in a manner other than intended. So the only thing I can think of that I'd be fairly uncomfortable with signing off on is something if someone wanted to use like our entire park for something. But then I thought about it the other day. We issued a special event permit for a fun run, and all they did was set up a tent in the park, and they had like 50 people. It was a tent for a DJ, and it really didn't create not one complaint, not one call, not nothing. It was very innocuous. It was easy, you know, to approve. I could see stuff like that being easy. Like, oh, we don't get that often. It maybe once a year you'll get a request like that. But the use of village property, more or less, I can't tell you how many times we talked to the school district and the park district, and they just have an internal process. Like we use Joel Middle School's parking lot, and we just reach out to the school district and say, can we use your parking lot? And they're like, yeah, Steve, provide us a certificate of insurance, you're fine. And that's kind of what we like to do too, because those are the groups that would typically ask to use our property. I couldn't come up with anything else other than the park that I could see would be, but if it was that concerning, I'd bring it back to the board if I felt like, oh no, this is beyond that. The non-residential, so this goes back to the parking. One of the triggers we were talking about putting a general clause in is, let's say you're having an event. It's different to put 2 tents up and take 2 spaces out of 50 in a parking lot. But if you want to block a drive aisle, like that would be an issue then. Mike and I would be like, absolutely not. That's for fire safety or whatever. So at least there's some kind of internal review that if you're using a commercial parking lot, the staff is at least saying, no, you can't block a drive aisle. And no, that's too many parking. We haven't come up with like a proportion or anything, but I can tell you the thing that I wouldn't say bothers me, but the thing about the parking requirement is you can park legally on streets. So it's hard to say that you took 2 spots away from your parking lot when you back up to like a neighborhood that you're going to be parking at anyways, even if you had those 2 spots and your event was going to overflow and 10 extra cars are going to park on the street. People park on streets for baseball games all the time in neighborhoods. It happens once in a blue moon. It's not often. unless you live by a park, and then it happens a lot for baseball. But for these types of events, we only get a handful of them a year at most, like maybe 2 to 5 at most. And most of them are self-contained within commercial areas. But that was the thing. So if you spill over, it's not going to, if it was so big that we were expecting it to draw people from like the whole region, then I could see us saying, hey, that's beyond our scope. We need to bring it to the board, but we've just never come across that. And then that was the thing. So we had this kind of line put in: parking spaces needed to accommodate special event guests at a proportional rate that would impact the amount of available parking for adjacent tenants. It's just looking at it and saying, you're taking 2 spots, you're fine. You're taking 10 spots, that's a problem. So that's where we're at. That's kind of where we ended up. To summary very quickly, take the food truck stuff potentially out. Make the parking requirement more of a discretionary review by the staff, and then create the liquor license, just go straight to the mayor. And then everything else goes to the board if it's using our right of way or our staff or amplification after a certain time.
I think that all makes sense to me. Good.
Yep, seems a lot simpler. I'm good with it.
More streamlined.
Wait till we get the mobile food trucks. That one was awful. Mike and I were trying to figure out how to not require a special event for it, because the trigger was, if you're trying to balance that act of the board and, trying to protect brick and mortar businesses by not having a food truck there, but then saying what's reasonable, that we at least had a catch with the special event, because you could say, well, at least you can get a special event permit. You can be there for 4 hours. So Mike and I are that's the only thing we're trying to figure out a way to tweak in the code so it's self-contained.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, we're
anything
good.
else?
All good.
Good.
No, I'm not sure about it, but I'd like to hear more about it myself. I keep, there's nothing wrong with what you're proposing in my mind, Steve, except I think about when you're gone, the long-term impact any decision would have, because we're kind of ceding some of our authority back onto the staff. And I have no concern about you misusing it or anything, but there'll be future people in your spot. And that's what I don't want to, that would be my only concern about it. Other than that, it sounds pretty practical and reasonable to me, as it is now with you there. But I do have that concern in the back of my head.
One point to make about that sort of thing is, the board obviously has, you are the governing body. The board can delegate to staff, which is kind of when you pass an ordinance or a code, you're creating certain guidelines and parameters, and then the staff are enforcing that or living within the terms of that. You can delegate some discretion, as long as it isn't like you wouldn't, the discretion lies in the corporate body, but you can delegate discretion with staff that has parameters on it. So in other words, if there was an ordinance that said under these certain conditions that, it falls within the staff prerogative to issue a permit. If it doesn't meet those standards, they can say no. And on the other hand, if it meets, if it falls within certain other parameters, it comes to the board. And I think that's kind of what Steve is suggesting. So it all goes back to the board and what those, what are the conditions under which you're okay with the staff exercising that discretion that has those parameters attached to it.
Plus, this can be changed. I mean,
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
if
Yeah.
somebody's abusing it, staff level, we just take it
Or you
away.
don't like the way I'm approving things, or the next, administrator down the road.
Yeah,
And you say,
right.
well, this
Well, can we-
administrator's all.
Right.
Can we just set the parameter that these provisions are in, as long as the current administration is in place, that then they're
I
revisited or
probably
something?
wouldn't do that, because
No.
like, first of all,
Okay.
I hope.
Well,
to
that's
be
what
here-
Mike was saying. He's
I
fine with you,
hope to
but
be here
maybe
a
not
long
down the
time,
road.
but like, that would just create an administrative issue of like, you'd have to make sure that someone brought it back to the board and changed it. The way I look at it, and
True.
as practical as what we're doing is trying to make it practical.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to do is balance the things that when we get asked something last second, trying to do it in a way that I know the board would say, Steve, why did you tell little Billy he couldn't have his pizza truck at his party on Saturday when you
Yeah.
found out about it 2 hours before the event? And I'd be like, the board would never want me to tell this person no.
Right.
And so I'm trying to prevent that by allowing me to make those types of decisions internally.
What I'm saying though is with
Yeah.
anything, we can change it.
Yeah.
You get a new administrator and things go a different direction,
I
change
agree.
it,
I agree.
or whoever's the current.
I
board
think
is.
it's fine.
Yeah,
My
I think it's fine.
opinion.
Absolutely.
Yep, very good. All right, no exec session, motion adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. All right, good night. Thank you.
Good night.